Hey folks, here we are talking today about civil disobedience versus the theory of fair play, represented by, Socrates, John Rawls, Henry David Thoreau, and Martin Luther King Jr. Again, I have this lighting problem here with the whiteboard. Sorry about that. I'll try to get it more focused here if I can. But one thing I did, so we got from the book at the end of chapter 1, we have Henry David Thoreau and John Rawls. And I wanted to get the lecture I gave on this, or if you can call it a lecture, at the end of class this week was rather, it was too fast and too rushed at the end of class. So I wanted to get some things clear here, because you are going to be responsible for this information. You should know what the position of Socrates, Thoreau, Rawls, and MLK are. You should know essentially what the duty of fair play versus versus civil disobedience are, for sure, and how they manifest over the centuries, really over Socrates in 399 BC, Rawls in the, I believe, now it shows you how little I know about this, Rawls in the 20th century, Thoreau in the 19th century, and MLK in the 20th century as well. You don't have to know those dates. It's just important to know how these ideas follow from one another. And just like everything, the theories are not completely distinct from each other. The theories are distinct from each other, civil disobedience versus fair play. But how they're used by these different people, these different philosophers over time, they don't fit neatly into one side or the other as much as a book or Wikipedia or Google or whatever might tell you. So, having said that, looking at the book, they have Socrates basically fits into fair play, duty of fair play, as John Rawls would have it. Thoreau fits into civil disobedience. MLK fits mostly into civil disobedience. What I did is I looked it up on AI. Not that AI is always right, but to see what that the general consensus is on the internet. What that is, the Google AI feature had to say was that civil disobedience and fair play exist in tension, and this is interesting. They exist in a state of tension that may be a necessary friction in order to have justice. All right, that's very Socratic. That is the friction between opposites, as we talked about in class last time. Opposite forces, opposite ideas, really, opposite opinions, helping us to move forward in knowledge. That is, we gain knowledge from the tension between opposites. Very Socratic idea. And hopefully that's how that will help us. Hopefully that state of tension will help us learn rather than hinder the process of learning, as it seems to do in a lot of people's minds. That is, the tension between opposites is not good. No, it is very good. That's how we learn. And that even corresponds somewhat to the idea of civil disobedience that Thoreau gives us in the book, saying that if injustice is a necessary friction in the machine of government, let it go, perchance it will wear smooth. Interesting idea. That's on page 25. That's Thoreau's civil disobedience. Anyway, so you have, this is really culminating in Martin Luther King in the letter I posted for you to read, the letter from Birmingham jail, where Dr. King, and now is, he's in, it's 1960, August 1963, so right in the middle of the civil rights movement, really. And he's in a jail in Birmingham for peacefully protesting. And he writes this letter to judges, authorities, about why he broke the law. Okay. Now, again, civil disobedience and fair play are traditionally viewed as opposites. But in this article, King argues that if laws are deeply unjust, then it is our duty of fair play to break them in order to restore justice. Okay, so rather than participate in an unjust law. It actually is fair and dutiful to break that law. That is a feature of civil disobedience right there. So what do we basically have to say? Okay, Socrates, interestingly, in what we read, Socrates in prison, the excerpt from Plato's Credo. Interestingly, he, like Henry David Thoreau, is against democracy. There are statements in that passage where Socrates says, oh, we don't want to believe just the general opinion. We want the opinion of experts. And that was something Socrates really believed, that the majority is not necessarily right. Rather, we want to get the opinion of those who are knowledgeable in a certain subject, the experts, the expert opinion. So when it comes to politics and government, Socrates did not actually believe in democracy, even though Athens at the time was a very early example of democracy, of a democratic state. He did not believe in democracy because he believed, and this is an interesting thing you can apply to today, he believed that the average citizen of Athens, or the majority, were not educated in civics and politics and policy enough to give an educated vote. It's a very interesting point because it makes some sense. But then we can have problems with that if we say, well, then only the elite, educated class of people who are learned in politics and civics should have a vote. And who's going to decide who those people are, who's qualified? Then you got an elitist class, you got trouble. But I'll let you ponder that point on your own. So Socrates was against democracy and majority opinion when it comes to politics or consorting with the majority's vote. But at the same time, he would not break the law. He believed in the duty of fair play. He believed he had tacitly consented to a contract to obey the laws of Athens, even if he disagreed with what those laws were or how they were enforced, even to the point of his death. So that sort of counts as fair play in the sense that you must obey the laws regardless of how you feel about them, because you don't want to be a freeloader. You don't want to ride for free, taking the benefits of your society and not taking the bad parts, taking only the good and ignoring the bad. That is what fair play is about, according to John Rawls. The duty of fair play. We have the excerpt from John Rawls on page 17. No, well, you know where it is in your book, 21 to 24. John Rawls says that you have to go with the majority. It's a little different than Socrates, but it's still fair play in the sense that Rawls says on page 23, in agreeing to a democratic constitution, one accepts at the same time the principles of majority rule. Assuming the constitution is just and we have plan to accept its benefits, we must obey its laws. We don't want to, essentially he's saying, we have to wait for the majority to change the law. If we want the law changed, we need to go within the law. We can protest peacefully, but we cannot break the law. Wait for the majority to agree with us. Or not wait for them, but to protest in a way and lobby for a change in law. But you do have to wait for the majority because you're in a democracy. Those are the rules you've accepted by tacit consent to doing what the majority enacts. So you're bound by duty to obey that rule. And so it sort of sounds deontological. It's rule-based, it's duty-based, right? In that sense, it is deontological. In that way, we are bound to follow what we might believe to be unjust laws. So if you believe that a law is unjust, but the majority has enacted that law and legislated that law, you're bound to follow it because you are reaping the benefits of this society that has laws you don't agree with, and you must take the downside as well. Okay, take the benefits. You've got to take the punishment or the downside or laws that you don't like. you don't want to be you don't have a free ride. The whole point is about a balance. So fair play is all about balance. You take the benefits, you got to take the downside. That's it. Henry David Thoreau disagrees with this, and he has what he has to say about it is, interestingly, Thoreau is for civil disobedience. He is for disobeying unjust laws. So in that, it's interesting because he has something in common with Socrates, and that Socrates, of course, again, these people don't fall neatly into one or the other category, fair play or civil disobedience. Socrates seems generally like, at least in Crito, in the example we read, to be generally an example of fair play. But at the same time, he has this in common with Thoreau, who is all about civil disobedience. Thoreau says, we want to follow the wise minority, not the unwise majority. Okay, the majority, in fact, Thoreau interestingly says on page 24, this is a really interesting statement. Page 24 of your book, in the second full paragraph, he says, the majority are permitted to rule, and for a long period continue to rule, not because they are most likely to be in the right. The majority is not most likely to be right. Why would they? Nor because it seems fairest to the minority, but because the majority is physically the strongest. So Thoreau says, this sounds a little cynical, a little funny. He's saying, well, why should we follow the majority? Why are they more likely to be right? Because there's more of them? No, they're stronger. There's more of them. They're bigger in numbers, and they can get their way. So he's bringing in this idea of maybe they're just forcing it because there's more of them. They're physically stronger. That's why history has examples of the majority ruling, not because of a fair society, but because there's more of them and they're going to get their way one way or the other. That's why we follow the majority. Interesting point. You can make of that what you will. So he's saying, follow the wise minority. Don't think just because there's a majority opinion or has been voted by a majority that it's right. So Thoreau has this sort of overall philosophy of law versus morality. Law does not equal morality. Fair play, John Rawls, he's saying, well, you have to follow the majority. You have to follow the law because that's the moral thing to do, is follow the law. But Thoreau is saying that putting something into law, legislating something, does not make it more just. It's not, just because it's the law does not confuse or conflate law with morality. There's many unjust laws. So do not follow the law just because it's the law. The law and morality are two separate things. So if you want to do what's right, in fact, it's sort of your duty to do what's right, not what is lawful necessarily. So the majority doesn't necessarily know anything. Follow the wise minority. So there's civil disobedience. He's saying, go ahead and break the law. Again, on page 25 at the second half, unjust laws exist. Shall we be content to obey them, or shall we endeavor to amend them and obey them until we have succeeded, or shall we transgress them at once? Generally, in government, they think that you should wait till we've persuaded the majority to alter them. He's talking about fair play then. But Thoreau continues, they think that if they should resist, the remedy would be worse than the evil. But it is the fault of the government itself that the remedy is worse than the evil. It makes it worse. Well, why is it not more apt to anticipate and provide for reform? Why does it not cherish its wise minority? Break the law if it's unjust. Your duty is not to follow the law, just period. It is to follow justice. It is to follow morality, to act morally, not lawfully. The two are not the same. So this theme that runs through civil disobedience and Henry David Thoreau and Martin Luther King is law is not necessarily morality. Don't confuse them. They are distinct in a lot of cases. Now, to continue to what we really want to hit here is Martin Luther King in his letter from Birmingham jail. Again, he's in jail when he writes this in 1963, Birmingham, Alabama, writing to the judges, I guess, who are in charge of his case, I suppose. And I also have this Martin Luther King reading this letter posted to Canvas for you as well. So here we have, there's a lot of points in here to get through. We don't have a lot of time to do the whole thing. So please read the article or listen to the article or both and find these passages. I think the first one I wanted to read is on page 2 of the letter, as I have it on canvas for you, towards the bottom or the second half of that page. This point that runs through Martin Luther King's letter here is what the majority or the government is asking the American blacks, or he calls it because of the time period, the American Negro, to do is to wait. Wait until time, history naturally gives us more freedom, allows us to be free. And this is the big problem. It's called the myth of time, Martin Luther King. He says, again, at the bottom of that page 2, to wait has almost always meant never. It is a tranquilizing thalidomide. Thalidomide is a drug that was given around that time that turned out to be very damaging, relieving the emotional stress for a moment, only to give birth to an ill-formed infant of frustration. It was a drug given to babies. He's making a very interesting metaphor. We must come to see, with the distinguished jurist of yesterday, that justice too long delayed is justice denied. So he's saying the authorities, the white majority, the rulers, the legislators, the government keeps telling us, wait for justice. Wait. It will come naturally, as if time somehow has a natural healing effect. Martin Luther King's point is it does not. It takes direct action, peaceful action in his case, civil action, but it takes direct action in order to change and become more free and the changes that are needed in this case. An unjust law is no law at all. There we have that civil disobedience aspect of Thoreau. Saying there's an unjust law cannot be a law. So there may be unjust laws, but we are not bound by duty to follow them just because they're laws, just because the majority has agreed to them, just because they've been legislated, is no reason to follow them. So MLK does believe in civil disobedience in that sense. Maybe the most interesting point, there's so many points he makes in this, it's very hard to talk about it in a brief period of time. On page 3 at the top, he says, "You express a great deal of anxiety over our willingness to break laws. This is certainly a legitimate concern, since we so diligently urge people to obey the Supreme Court decision of 1954 outlawing segregation in the public schools. It is rather strange and paradoxical to find us consciously breaking laws. One may well ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer is found in the fact that there are two types of laws. There are just laws and there are unjust laws. Again, that distinction between law and morality, justice and law, they do not necessarily correspond to each other. There are two distinct things, what is right and what is lawful. Therefore, it is your duty to break the law that is unjust. So there are just laws and there are unjust laws. I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. There's your civil disobedience. It's not just okay to break an unjust law, it's your duty to act justly and break an unjust law. So what is the difference between the two? How does one determine when a law is just or unjust? A just law is man-made code that squares with the moral law or with the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. And you can follow that down the top of page 3. At the bottom of page 3, though, he really gives us another extremely important, maybe the most important statement in this paper, in this letter, where he says what he really fears is not what he calls the white moderate. That is, the generally progressive liberal of 1963, a person who believes that African Americans should not be oppressed, that there should be laws for equality in the South, in the North, everywhere in the country. But these people don't act. They're complacent, and they believe in this myth of time. They're not willing to sacrifice much or risk much for what they think is just. And they think that the African Americans should be given their ultimate freedom and justice and equality, but they're not really willing to speak up. They're not really willing to risk anything, which is a very normal situation in America. You could even compare it to a lot of what's going on now. We just, we're comfortable, we have food, we have shelter. So we can say we believe in freedom, we believe in this, we believe people should not be oppressed, we believe in certain issues, but are willing to risk our livelihood and our safety for it. So that penultimate, this last full paragraph on page 3 of the letter that you have says, I must make 2 honest confessions for you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. I must confess in the last few years I've been very disappointed with white moderates. I have reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block and stride towards freedom is not the white citizen councilor or the Ku Klux Klan, but it is the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice. So here we really have civil disobedience. He said the Ku Klux Klan, outright racism and white supremacy, is less dangerous than the white moderate, probably because there are more white moderates than there are Ku Klux Klan members, I would hope, even at this time. So the white moderate is devoted to order and law, but not necessarily justice. They want to keep the status quo. They want to do what they believe is right. And they believe that integration and civil rights and the civil rights movement, the freedoms for the African American is absolutely right. But they believe in maintaining the order. So they say, well, time will naturally bring this about. I don't have to do anything extreme here. I don't have to break the law. They prefer negative peace, which is the absence of tension. So the white moderate prefers negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. That is, I agree with your goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action. So lukewarm acceptance of the status quo is much more bewildering than outright rejection. It's bewildering and that is confusing. Well, what's your point? You're just going to sit there and say, oh, I believe you're right. I'm for your cause and that's it. But I'm not going to do anything or risk anything because I want the status quo. I don't want to screw up what's going on right now in my life because I'm on top receiving the benefits. Okay, so he's more scared of that lukewarm white majority of moderates than he is of the extreme Ku Klux Klan members who are doing, burning crosses and lynching people and stuff, because they're sort of a minority. They're taking direct, very, very bad action. But a mass of people who are not acting at all is more dangerous in the view of Martin Luther King. So there you have the doctrine of civil disobedience here very strongly in that he's saying negative action or negative peace, which is what is sought by the sort of this what he calls the white moderates, the white majority, is the absence of tension and direct action. So those people, he says, are more devoted to order than they are to justice. They're more devoted to law than they are to justice. So law and justice right there are not the same thing at all. Therefore, what Martin Luther King is saying is, you can believe in fair play, that you're obliged to obey the law no matter what. But if that law is not just, then it's no law at all. There's no point at all there. Okay, now I've already said quite a bit here, and I hope that it's somewhat clear. I had some notes here, but as I got into this, I really didn't consort them much. What you really need to know, I don't know if you can even read this. So we have Socrates, just to sum this up. Socrates is against, you can't read that, it's really, against democracy and majority rule, but he believes in fair play. Okay. Rawls is for fair play, but he wants us to wait for the majority in order to change the law, do it within the system. Thoreau says, go against the system. Civil disobedience is the way. Let's go with the wise minority, because law and morality is not the same thing. And MLK basically agrees with that in his civil disobedience. An unjust law is no law at all. Yeah, sorry about that whiteboard. Anyway, we will, I wanted to give more information about this because we have very limited class time. We're going to start on egoism on Monday. I'll see you then.